Okay. Get started? Okay. You're on. You're on. Hello, I'm Stuart Goche, County Agent with the LSU Ag Center, and welcome to Get It Growing with the Lafayette Master Gardeners. I have with me our guest today, Ms. Janae Foley, who's kind of our master propagator and takes care of a lot of our nursery beds with the Lafayette Master Gardener Group. And today what we thought we would talk about is garden problems. We're getting a lot of rain. We have a lot of heat and humidity this time of year. We're getting a lot of samples brought in. People want to know what's causing this, what's causing that. We thought we'd dedicate our show to what are some things that we're seeing in gardens. And maybe by going over these, it'll give you some ideas of what you need to do to prevent these problems or how to deal with them.
Right, and you know what an interesting fact is, master gardeners actually brought in all these samples. You know, it's funny to think, I always kind of find it comforting to see a problem in somebody else's garden that I'm having in mine. It makes you feel a little bit better. So these are actually all samples we all went out and, you know, picked this morning, problems that are occurring right here in Lafayette, and Stuart is going to give us a summary of fixes that are possible for some of these things. We haven't stymied him yet. You know, he is really up on all the diseases and the ways that you can help try and control those diseases in your yard. What do you think is the major problem we're seeing this year?
Well, we're starting to get a lot of rain right now, and whenever we start getting these daily showers, it just makes the perfect environment for a lot of these fungal diseases, especially to start taking off in our gardens. And unfortunately, there's not always a lot you can do to stop that. If you're getting rain every day, it's very hard to apply fungicides that are gonna be very effective. Also, the plants start getting under stress with the heat and humidity. Sometimes the soil starts getting a little waterlogged. So you have a stressed plant, high temperatures, high humidity. If the diseases are present, they're just going to run rampant. If you're interested in plant diseases and you're interested in plant problems, one thing that I'd urge you to do is to think about taking the Master Gardener class. And the registration deadline is coming up for that. It's actually going to end on July 11th. And the way to apply for the class is to simply either go on our website, the lsuagcenter.com website. The Lafayette Master Gardener Group has a application listed there that you can download and print, or you can call our office at 291-7090 and we'll send you an application. Once you apply for the Master Gardener class, we'll get back in touch with you and we select a class usually of about 30 each year. We start the class around the end of August, and we run till about the middle to end of November. We meet every Thursday from 8:30 to about 3, and each week we cover a different topic. So we're going to go over in the class a lot of these topics in a lot more depth, and we get our specialists with the LSU Ag Center from Baton Rouge to come in. Our plant pathologist, Dr. Don Farron, comes in, and he teaches, you know, a whole day on how to identify plant diseases. Our entomologist comes in and teaches a whole day on how to identify some of these problems. So if you have an interest in it and you want to be a better gardener, the Master Gardener class is a good way to get more education. It is also, you have to remember, it's a volunteer organization. So once you get this training, we expect you to, in return, do 40 hours of volunteer work back in service to our organization in the Lafayette community.
And there are many, many opportunities. There are people in Master Gardeners. You know, we all share a love of gardening. We all believe, obviously, in community service. But there are people who have small gardens. There are people that, you know, for health reasons don't garden as much anymore. There's a whole array of opportunities. We have people who do computer work. You know, we have people, we're all required to do phone hours in the ag office. But we do volunteer work, co-projects with other organizations. So there's a whole range of projects. You know, you don't have to do your whole 40 hours in gardening per se, you know, digging in the dirt, although that opportunity is available too. We are at the demo gardens at the R. Nelson Hart Center every Wednesday, roughly from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And if you're having a problem, we have got roughly 1,200 square foot vegetable garden out there. You know, you can see some of these problems. You can talk with the people who work that garden about varieties they're having success with that seem to, you know, be working in our heat and humidity. It's a great way to meet people and to increase your agricultural knowledge.
So if you're interested in the program, sign up and do it quick because it's going to end on July 11th. And if you have any questions about the program, call our office, 291-7090. We'll help you get signed up if you want to take part in that great program this year. Let's start out with some of the things that were brought in. One of our favorite flowers this time of year is the Crape Myrtle. And a lot of people call in, what's wrong with my Crape Myrtle? Why isn't it blooming well? Well, if you look closely at this Crape Myrtle, you look at the buds, you see there's almost like a white powdered sugar kind of on those buds. That is a disease called powdery mildew. And powdery mildew is a problem that you'll see on some varieties of Crape Myrtles. We would hopefully encourage you to plant varieties that are resistant, but unfortunately, you may not have planted a resistant variety. And so you have two choices. One, learn to deal with this problem by either spraying fungicide or maybe doing some practices like don't fertilize or prune that plant as heavily, don't encourage as much new growth, and sometimes that reduces your powdery mildew incidence, or dig the plant up and get one that is resistant and not have to worry about dealing with powdery mildew every year. But there are some varieties that are very, very susceptible to powdery mildew. Every year you're going to see this powdered sugar, especially if you're one of these people that like to do that New Orleans cut and pollard them back. You get all that new growth. That new growth is very susceptible to powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is kind of a different fungus in terms of it doesn't like free water. So actually when we get a lot of rain, it actually sometimes knocks back the powdery mildew. We get the highest amount of powdery mildew when we have high humidity and drier weather, which we kind of had earlier this year.
Right. And we can say too, you briefly touched on that. It's a shame to have to cut a tree down after it's been growing for years. If you can do a little bit of research before you plant a tree, you can, access the Ag Center website. There's a brochure in the office, Crape Myrtles for Louisiana Landscapes. And another problem we see, is people not expecting the height that they get from some varieties of Crape Myrtles. Some Crape Myrtles get fairly tall. There are shorter varieties, but you've got to research that topic before you plant, a Crape Myrtle that you're hoping is going to be 6 feet and it turns into a 12-feet Crape Myrtle. So, always try and educate yourself on the diseases of a plant and the characteristics of a plant before you get it in the ground.
And unfortunately, that's usually when we get calls from people, this plant's been in the yard for years, and they're going to be real reluctant to have to take the plant out. But there are some varieties that are very susceptible to powdery mildew, like this variety. There's also another disease called Circosta leaf spot. If you have Crape Myrtles in your yard right now, the leaves are falling off of the plant. Your ground is, sidewalks littered with the leaves. That is a variety that's very susceptible to Circosta leaf spot. Kind of the same thing. There are some varieties that have more resistance. Spraying fungicide is sometimes very disheartening in terms of getting a good response to spraying a big Crape Myrtle with fungicide after the disease is rampant. A lot of these fungicide products really need to be put out as a preventative. They're not really a curative product. So try to plant the right varieties. In our little brochure, we have some of our specialists at LSU, our pathologists, they actually do ratings on these different varieties. They'll go out and look, which varieties have less Circosta, which ones have less powdery mildew, and we publish that in our literature. So that's what we'd recommend. For our area, there's a white one called Natchez. It's a very hardy one that you can plant. It does get kind of large. There's a smaller white one called a Coma. That's a good one.
We have that at Civitan. And by the way, that's one that's coming to be one of our favorites because the Acoma is shorter and it also has a natural weeping tendency. Really, really neat tree. There's also two others. If you're driving down Congress, we planted a pink velour out there and a peppermint lace. Some of the newer ones we got donated, and they both seem to be doing well. Those are high stress situations, little care. So, they're proving to be durable plantings. And we have another one ready to go that Stuart had actually gotten from the National Arboretum, and we'll put it out in the fall.
Yeah, there's a new one, Arapaho.
Exactly.
That was released. That is a very dark red variety that has maybe a little better disease resistance. The other thing we mentioned about Crape Myrtles, they're one of the few plants that really will do well if you plant them in the middle of the summer. So if you want to stick something in your yard this summer, Crape Myrtles usually transplant even in the heat of the summer with good success. And on the pruning, you would want to prune your Crape Myrtles. Generally, they bloom on the new wood. We'll usually tell people prune them usually like in January, February is a good time to go ahead and prune them. It's not like with azaleas where we worry about pruning them late in the year in July where you'd maybe be cutting off some buds that are going to be forming for the next year. Let's go on to citrus because we're getting a lot of calls on citrus right now. This is a citrus that is infested with whitefly. And when you get a big whitefly buildup, you get this sooty mold, this black soot coating all over the leaves. Now, you get whitefly problems on citrus for a number of different reasons. I find a lot of times in areas of poor airflow, next to homes, people will put them to protect them from the freeze, but when you do that, you kind of create a microclimate where it stays warmer through a lot of the year, where you will build up these huge whitefly populations next to a house if the airflow is not good. Some varieties of citrus tend to harbor more whiteflies. The canopy on the trees, as they get bigger, gets real dense, and the whiteflies just really thrive under those conditions. To control whiteflies can be difficult. Sprays with oil and malathion do a pretty good job. There's a newer product called imidacloprid, which is in a product called Pravado, works real well at controlling whiteflies, but it usually takes multiple sprays. When you spray a big citrus tree, just remember it's probably going to take you 2-3 gallons of spray to really do a good job to coat that tree where it's dripping when you finish spraying. You need a lot of pressure, a lot of volume. Soak it really well and try to get underneath the leaves as much as you can to get good thorough coverage. But if you don't control the sooty mold, what's going to happen is if you have fruit on that tree, they're going to be black in the fall. You can wash that off, but it makes it a lot easier if you can control it and keep these whiteflies from getting too bad. And you really want to do sprays about once a month from about now through August, September. And once you get into October, November, it's too late. You need to try to control these things now. With the oil sprays, be very careful. If it's real hot, you can burn trees with oil. Use the recommended rate. Don't do it in the heat of the day.
And we also have, we were briefly talking about that, the thrill of a new citrus disease in Louisiana. You know, we've had the daylily rust come in. Now there's a new citrus disease.
There's a new problem in town, as you'd say, in terms of citrus. We're not sure that we have it yet in the Acadiana area. They have found it in the New Orleans area. It is a bacterial disease called citrus greening, and it's spread by this little insect called the psyllid. And they're doing some scouting actually right now in the Acadiana area to look to see if we have the vector, this little psyllid here, or they can see if there's any trees that are showing up with it. To our knowledge, this has been just isolated to Orleans and Jefferson Parish, but the Department of Ag is doing a lot of scouting, and I'm actually going to a training next week where they're going to be training us to be on the lookout for this. But this disease is a major problem in Florida, and they have some concerns that it's something that we don't want to allow to spread throughout Louisiana because it will kill trees, and it's a very, very, very devastating disease.
And there's not a treatment, as I understand it.
No,
it kills the tree in 2 years.
It's a bacterial disease that comes in, and once the tree's infected, pretty much the trees have to be removed.
And they obviously yet have not found a disease-resistant tree. It's
No.
too new in the
Right.
evolution of the disease.
Right, but it is going to maybe have an impact, especially on trees being transported out of Louisiana, because as you would expect, a lot of other states are real concerned about, keeping this disease out of their state.
Well, you've noticed, I had noticed, not knowing why, that there didn't seem to be citrus for sale as much, and evidently why. I think they've evidently started the quarantine in Florida and keep things within states trying to control the disease.
Trying to control it. Let's talk about daylilies, and we have some rust here that's showing up, and this is the time of year that actually this rust problem actually goes a little bit dormant. Rust problems will be worse usually in the spring when it's a little cool, and again in the fall of the year. This disease came in probably about 6-7 years ago, came into the United States, was real devastating. Certain varieties are very, very susceptible to this problem. And what we found over the last few years is that probably the key is to plant a resistant variety. You can do a little spraying with fungicides, but in the long run, you really are better off switching over the varieties that you're growing. What you're going to see if your plants are infested with this is a lot of reddish pustules on the backside of the leaf. You can see how the tips of the leaves kind of turn brown like that. Probably the worst months for this are going to be like in October, September. So be on the lookout for it. You might want to go in right now, take off all the diseased foliage. When we get maybe a month from now, maybe spray a little fungicide to try to help a little bit with it. Mulch them with pine straw so you don't get a lot of water and dirt splashing up on the leaves. And long term, if you have some varieties that are very susceptible, try to switch them out and plant some of the ones that seem to have a little more tolerance to it.
At the demo garden, we've been doing that. We started out with a huge bed, and year by year, we're really selectively trying to get down to. We started with probably 60 or 70, and we're trying to get that down to a dozen of the daylilies that show very, very little problems with the daylily rust.
I want to talk a little about America's favorite fruit, and that's the tomato that we'll grow in our garden. And tomatoes this time of year in Louisiana are very difficult to grow, because I can tell you from personal experience in my garden, this is what my tomatoes look like. It's not real pretty. You have a lot of cracking, concentric and radial cracking that occurs. And a lot of that is because of the heat and the humidity and the moisture in the soil. What happens when you get cracking on fruit when basically the pulp of the fruit expands quicker than the skin can keep up with. And when you get a lot of rain, the fruit will start to crack like this. Fall tomatoes, cracking is a huge problem. Summer tomatoes, cracking is a huge problem. We can grow some varieties that are more crack resistant. Unfortunately, with that, you lose a lot of the flavor and you get a real firm textured tomato. But if you want to grow tomatoes, there are some real crack resistant ones that are like this one. You can feel it's almost like a soft hard ball, a real firm tomato, and it's still doing a little bit of cracking. But try to keep the moisture as even as possible. Try to mulch your plants well, and hopefully the weather will kind of even out. We won't be getting as much rain, and we can help a little bit with this cracking. If you want to plant fall tomatoes, you need to try to get them in the ground by the end of this month in July. A lot of people wait too late. They'll plant their fall tomatoes in late August, September. They're not going to have enough time to mature before we get a frost in November. So try to plant your fall tomatoes late July for best results, and you'll have enough time for them to mature.
Have you seen any of the little container tomatoes that seem to be performing better than
There's
other
some
varieties?
container varieties. There's one called Better Bush that I know we've had some luck with that does well. A lot of people in Lafayette like to grow tomatoes in a container. Tomatoes will grow well in containers. But just make sure you plant a container variety. A lot of the full-size varieties like Better Boy, Celebrity, you're not going to have generally as good a luck trying to grow them as a container as a container variety that will have a dwarf root system and a dwarf plant canopy. If you grow fall tomatoes, try to grow a variety that is heat resistant. A lot of the Sun Leaper, Solar Set, Heat Wave, those type varieties, Sun Master, are designed to develop more flowers. And because they have more flowers on the plant, there's a greater chance that some of those flowers are going to turn into tomatoes. So you really want to plant a heat set type. Celebrity or Better Boy usually cracks a lot in the fall, and you don't get real good fruit set.
And we also have brochures, Louisiana Vegetable Planting Guide, to help you select those varieties that do well in this part of the country, and an insect management in home vegetable gardenings. And disease management also. I hadn't seen the disease. The Ag Center is reprinting a lot of the booklets.
We've gone through a lull where we really didn't have a lot of publications available for the public, but now in the last year, we've started printing a lot of our publications again. These publications are either free if you want to come in the office on the third floor of the City Parish Government Building, 1010 Lafayette Street. You can come in, browse through our literature, pick some of these gardening pamphlets up, or call us and we can mail them to you as well. We also put them out at a lot of the garden shows that we go to, and some of the field days that we have. We'll try to make them available to people. But they're excellent resources that'll kind of get you started in the right direction. We're seeing a lot of spider mites on tomatoes, and I've brought in some leaves. This is actually from our container garden in our Nelson Horticulture Center. Spider mites are a big problem on tomatoes this time of year. You'll start noticing the foliage will start to yellow on the lower leaves. Spider mites usually get on the old growth first. You'll notice it, and you'll get kind of a speckled appearance. The leaves will start browning. A lot of times when spider mites become real severe, they're very hard to bring back under control. Sometimes the best solution is to pull the plants up and start over and try to clean it up that way, because spider mites can be very difficult when they get out of hand. We also have a little pepper garden there at our Nelson, and I enjoy working with peppers. Peppers are something that they're designed to do well in really hot weather. And so from now through the time we're going to get a frost, maybe in mid to late November, our pepper garden is going to really start to be nice and beautiful. You can get some bacterial disease on peppers, and I brought this in here just to show these peppers, a variety called marbles. We started getting some leaf drop, and you look at it, there's kind of like some yellow spots on the leaves, kind of a yellow halo. That is a bacterial disease that this variety evidently is susceptible to. causes this little bacterial leaf spot. Bacteria spread by water. So you get a lot of rain, you get a lot of this leaf spot splashing around on the leaves, the bacteria spreading on the leaf. It'll cause the leaves to fall off the plants and your pepper plants to defoliate. Try to keep the pepper plants dry. You can spray them with copper and diethane. Will help a little bit, and try to plant resistant varieties. A lot of the bell pepper types we've grown, and brought this one in just to show, this is a container bell pepper growing right next to it, and you can see the foliage looks fine. Mm-hmm. So it's like night and day, just in the ability of this plant to have some natural resistance to this bacterial disease versus this other variety that's very susceptible. These container bell peppers I'd also mentioned are great. We've been growing them maybe 2-3 years now, but they do just as well as any container tomato or better, and they'll grow 6-8 months in that pot, and they're very, very productive. They make very nice bell peppers that you can use in your cooking.
Do you remember the name?
We have 2 that we've grown. Both of them have been similar. One is Redskin, and the other one is Mohawk. And I think they're both were Park's varieties that we dealt with, Park Seed Company. But they both are excellent, and I would highly recommend them. I know our Master Gardener Group, we've started them and sold them the last few years, and I've seen them available at some other vendors in town as well.
We got some
squash leaves, and people this time of year call, why are my squash plants dying? What's going on with my squash? I thought I'd just mention a few things. One, we have the menace, just like we have on the Crape Myrtles. We have powdery mildew. That powdered sugar on squash leaves will start showing up this time of year. We also get a little leaf miner. Looks like you take a pen and draw kind of like a little squiggly line. The leaf miner on squash, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, those are actually a little fly larva, a little maggot that tunnels through the leaf. They don't do necessarily a lot of damage, but I have seen them on tomatoes bad enough where they'll start to defoliate plants, especially the older growth. There's a product called Spintor, Spinosad, that's actually an extract from a soil fungus. It's very safe. You can use it in organic gardening. It does a good job on leaf miner. Also pick up all your old dead leaves, because that's where the pupa are and where they're going to reinfect the plants. But leaf miner is a big problem. It also gets on citrus. We were showing some citrus earlier. Leaf miner on citrus is actually a little larva from a moth that infests citrus. And we can also use that same chemical, though, that Spinosad works well. And it's found in products like Conserve, Fertilome, Bagworm, and Fruit Tree Spray. Do a good job on it.
Now, at this point, I figure in any program like this, we've thoroughly confused people because we mentioned so many diseases and so many remedies. If they're having a problem, they can bring a sample of the disease in a Ziploc bag.
Right, and that's something that we offer to the public, and a lot of my job the last 15 years has been, people bring in samples every day, and my job is to try to help diagnose those problems. And very often, I guess I'm not able to tell them the answer, but we have specialists at the LSU Ag Center. We have entomologists, pathologists that I'll call, that they can help me diagnose the problem. We do offer a free service. If you have an insect problem, bring it in. Usually I'll tell you bring it in a jar of alcohol, and we can send it to the entomologist at LSU. He'll help identify what's going on and tell you what the pest is and what to do about it. The disease samples, they do charge $10 now. So if you have a squash leaf and you want to know what fungus is attacking that squash leaf and I can't give you a sufficient answer, we can send it to our Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab. You need to make a check for $10 made to LSU Plant Disease Diagnostic Clinic. We send it off. We can even email pictures in. And I love our Plant Disease Diagnostic Clinic. We have a kind of a new setup the last couple of years, and we can get you a response within a couple of days. We have a full-time pathologist who that's all he does is look at samples that come in from gardens across the state.
And
it's been a good service.
And talking about treatments, to let people know how, that you're not pulling answers out of the air, that you're using, recommended chemical guides.
Right. What we try to do with the LSU Ag Center is we're trying to provide research-based information. We have research stations across the state where we actually trial these different products, and we will make we actually have a recommendation guide for insect disease and weed management, and those guides are available on the web. You can look up what to spray on my rose bushes, what chemicals the LSU Ag Center recommends, and all that's available at lsuagcenter.com. Or if you're not able to access it on the web, call our office. We'll print you a copy and send it to you. We have, like we said, a lot of really neat pamphlets, rose diseases, azaleas, bedding plants for Louisiana landscape, tree growing guides. All available either on our website in PDF form, or we can send you a hard copy if you want to call us. And whenever you have questions, if you have, spots on your okra leaf like I have here, you can bring it in and I can try to diagnose what's going on, or we can send it off if we need to.
And there are usually typical problems in a year. If you start having a problem, usually your neighbor and your next door neighbor and people half a mile down the road, a lot of these problems seem to run in cycles.
Very cyclical, and usually when somebody will call our office, for example, Circosta leaf spot causing crepe myrtle leaves to drop, I'm going to get that same call probably 2-3 times a day. So your chances are you're not the first person to call with that problem that week.
And we also want to thank, we forgot to mention our gorgeous awards here. We were voted, the Get It Growing program was voted at the AOC Awards banquet, the best crew, which of course we already knew, and the Viewer's Choice Award. We thank you for your support of our program.
And we hope that you continue watching. Thank you for joining us on Get It Growing with the Lafayette Master Gardeners, and we'll be seeing you shortly.